Okay, this is the homework help video for Math 3 Unit 7 Worksheet 6. So we are converting parabolas from general to descriptive form. So general form is when it's all multiplied out, and then descriptive form is when we are going to end up completing the square and factoring so that we can readily graph. So I'm going to start with question number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and complete the square first. So what I want to do is make sure that the constant moves over to the y. So I'm going to move and subtract 7 from both sides. So that will give me y minus 7 equals, and then any leading coefficient that I have I want to factor out. So I don't want to factor out the 2x, even though they both have a 2x here. I only want to factor out the leading coefficient. So I'm going to factor a 2 out of both sides, or out of both terms. And then I need to complete the square here, right? So all I do is divide a 2 out of both of those, so that would be 2x squared plus 16x, and now I need to figure out what this constant is going to be. And then whatever I add to the right side, I also have to add to the left. And so I'm going to add a number here, but when I do that, it's being multiplied by 2, so whatever number is in here is being multiplied by 2. So I'm going to multiply by 2 times whatever that number is, right? So to find this middle term, I take half of 8. And so I take half of 1 of 8, which is 4. And then I square it, so I multiply it by itself. So 4 times 4, or 4 squared, is 16. So I want to add 16 to this side right here to make a perfect square. But again, it's being multiplied by 2. So this is going to be 2 times 16. Okay. So then I have y minus 7, and I'm going to add 32. And then there's a 2 here. And then I want to factor this, so this would be x plus 4 squared, because 4 times 4 gives me 16, and then 4x plus 4x gives me the 8x. And then I can combine those two together right here. So 32 minus 7 is 25. And then there's my equation, okay? So now they're asking for a few questions now that we have this equation, so let's go ahead and answer those. So the first thing they're asking me is what direction is my graph going? So this is a y equals, right? Y equals, and my number here is positive. And so because it's a y, it's going to point in the y direction, and then it's going to point up, okay? So it's going to point up because it's going in the y direction, and then that value is positive, right? So the y-axis is up and down. My leading coefficient is positive, so it's going to point up. So for my vertex, when I do my vertex, I want to look alphabetical order, so x before y. So I look here at the x, and then it's plus 4, so I'm going to use negative 4. And then I'm going to look over here for my y value, and so I want to do what's affecting the y value, so it's adding 25, so it's going to be negative 25. Okay. And then, of course, then my equation will just go right here. Okay, all right, and then let's go ahead and take a look at question number 3 as well. Okay, so again, I want to move the constant over to the other side, so I'm going to subtract 3. Okay. And then I always want to factor out my leading coefficient, right? So I need to factor out the negative 1/4. So I'm going to have y minus 3. And then I know I'm going to end up multiplying that by negative 1/4, right? Whatever that blank number is. So I'm going to put a little negative 1/4 times that blank. And then factor out the negative 1/4. So that's easy from this term, right? So when I divide out the negative 1/4, that's going to cancel, leaving just the x squared. It's this part that we have a hard time with, right? So remember what we're doing. When we factor out, we're dividing out. So I'm going to do that over to the side here. So I have my 2, and I'm dividing out negative 1/4. So I have the 2, and I'm factoring out or dividing out the negative 1/4. And I know when I'm dividing by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So dividing by negative 1/4 is the same as multiplying by negative 4. So that would be negative 8. So then this should be negative 8. Okay. All right, so again, what did I do? I subtracted the 3 to the other side. I know I'm going to add 2 things, right? I'm going to add something to both sides of the equation. And this side gets multiplied by negative 1/4, what I factored out, because this will also be multiplied by negative 1/4. Okay? So that's why that says negative 1/4 times. And so I did 2, and I divided by negative 1/4 because that's what I'm factoring out. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of negative 1/4 is negative 4, and 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. How can I check it to make it sure it's correct? I do negative 1/4 times x squared is negative 1/4 x squared, and a fourth of 8 is 2, and the double negative is positive. Okay, so let's go ahead and complete the square. So I want to take half of negative 8, right? So I'm going to do half of negative 8, which is negative 4, and then times that by itself, or square it, right? Same thing. So shoot, let's try that again. So negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16, so I want to add 16 to both sides. Okay. And then I want to simplify this. So negative 1/4 times 16, so that's 16 over 4, so 16 divided by 4. And then I want to factor that. So this will factor to x minus 4 twice, because negative 4 and negative 4 give me 16, and will also give me the negative 8. And then combine like terms right here. And then there is my equation. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that same equation over to the other side here, and I'll move the screen over in just a minute. Okay, so I just copied the equation over here. Okay, and then that's a negative here. So for the direction, so it's a y equals, so we know it's going to go a lot pointing in the y direction, so either pointed up or pointed down. And then because it's a negative coefficient here, then it's going to point down. So my direction is going to be down. And then for my vertex, so we want to do alphabetical order, so x before y. So what's affecting the x, so that will be opposite, so positive 4. And then what's affecting the y, opposite here, so positive 7. Okay. All right, and let's do one more here. Okay, take a look at question number 9. Okay, so I want to move the constant over to the other side, so I'm going to subtract the 120. And then I want to factor out the 1/3. Okay, so I want to factor out the 1/3. So here when I divide out the 1/3, it'll leave just the y squared. But then again on here, so I have the 8, and I want to factor out or divide out 1/3. And so dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, so 8 times 3 is 24. So again, I have the 8, and I'm dividing out the 1/3, or factoring out the 1/3, and dividing by a third is the same as multiplying by 3, so 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, so I subtracted the 120, and then factoring out the 1/3. And then I forgot to put the blanks in, so I'm going to go ahead and do that on the next line here. And then on this side again, I factored out the 1/3, so that means I'm going to have to multiply this number by a third as well. So this number gets multiplied by a third, so this one as well gets multiplied by a third. So I'm going to complete the square, so I'm trying to find the perfect square here. So I take half of 24, so I'm going to do 1/2 of 24, which is 12, and then multiply 12 by itself, which gives me 144. So add 144 to here and to here. Okay. So then I'm going to do 144 divided by 3. So 144 divided by 3, I'm going to just do that down here real quick. So 48. And then factor over here. Okay. So 12 times 12 gives me the 144, and 12y plus 12y gives me the 24y. Okay. And then combine like terms here, so I'm going to add those together. So negative 72, I believe, I hope. Okay, and then I'm going to just copy that equation over to the right-hand side, and I'll move the screen here in just a second. And so then there's my equation. So for my direction, so this is an x equals equation, so I know it's going to open towards the x-axis, right? So left or right. And so because it's a positive stretch here, it's going to open to the positive x direction, which is going to the right. So the direction is pointed to the right. And then for my vertex, I want to do alphabetical order, x before y. So I look at the x, so 72. And then the y, which is negative 12. So 72 and negative 12. And then that's it for objective 6.